There we are. We love the gorge. We're okay, haven't we? Yeah. Yeah.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this corporate delivery committee meeting for education and skills. Do we have apologies for absence, Gareth?
Yeah, I've got a couple, Chair, from Jan Curtis, Fiona Gordon and Sandra Joy.
Lovely, thank you very much. That's agenda item number 1 out the way. Agenda item number 2 is disclosures of personal and prejudicial interest. Do we have any? None in the room? None online? And then we can whip on to agenda item number 3, which is the minutes of the last meeting. So can I go through them page by page first, please? So page 1, page 2, and page 3. And if colleagues are content for me to approve and sign, can I ask for somebody to propose and to second, please? Lyndon's put his hand up there. Yeah,
yes, I'm happy, Chair, as well.
Thank you very much, Mike. That's lovely.
I apologise. I can't get my camera on to work, actually. It may be beneficial for everyone, but I can't get it to work.
That's okay. Thank you, Lyndon. Okay, so we are content for the minutes to be signed, and agenda item number 4 is for us to continue our focus on attendance and inclusion. And on that point, I think I'm handing over to Helen to take the lead with this part of the agenda.
Just before we start, though, I'd just like to say a big thank you to the people who are in the CDC and the councillors at the CDC in our last meeting. We were really grateful for your input and your support. And we've taken a lot of your suggestions forward and put them into this action plan. So just by way as an introduction then, obviously the action plan is in response to levels of attendance, as you're aware, dropping for the 4th consecutive year. So we are proposing a clear and concise plan to improve our processes, introduce some smarter ways of working within our education welfare service. We also want to work with all our stakeholders. We want to develop a new attendance policy, and we want to ensure an ethos of inclusivity and produce better outcomes for all our learners in Swansea. Okay. So our action plan is made up of several different actions, and we've broken it down into some outcomes, some progress to date, which we'd like to brief you on today. So our first action is to ensure every school has an attendance policy which is reviewed regularly, but reflects a holistic approach to behaviour attendance, to wellbeing and welfare. So what we want in that scenario is our outcomes to be improved consistency across all our settings, and we want a co-produced policy with clear expectations in relation to attendance and monitoring for all stakeholders, and that should be including parents, teachers and local authority staff. So our progress to date, we have got initial draft in its final stages, and we hope that that should be completed by the end of March. We have a response flow chart which has already been produced and implemented, but we acknowledge that that needs to be fully embedded. We have letters associated with the process, including those that accompany the fixed penalty notices, and they are in the process of being updated. We have organised a task and finish workshop with our education welfare service, and we're hoping by the end of the week we'll have those outcomes and all the information for that. We have organised a task and finish workshop for head teachers at the cross-phase meeting, which is planned for the 9th of February. The discussion planned also includes how best to engage with our learner voice and how to gauge our learner voice, which we know is really important.
Can I just pause for a second,
Yeah,
Helen? With the education welfare service there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry. We've also contacted our Parent Carer Forum to support with our parent and carer voice. So we want to make sure that all our stakeholders are included within our policies and processes. And finally, then, we hope to have policy sign-off via the CDC, and we want that done by as soon as possible and hopefully by April. Okay, our second action would be to produce a clear and concise guide to the work of the Education Welfare Service. Apologies for putting the acronym in earlier. And to embed the recommendations of the 2019-2020 consultation process. So what we want from that outcome is for stakeholder input to ensure consistency of practice and targeted response from our Education Welfare Service, our EWS. We want smarter ways of working to suit the current climate. We obviously want increased school attendance and we want improved outcomes for our learners. So our progress to date is that the inclusion strategy has been finalised, which provides the strategic direction for improving attendance. We've reviewed the wider pupil support team, of which I manage, and we've undertaken a new post, which is established, and to provide a strategic lead on attendance and exclusion. The officer, it will be taking up their position on the 27th of February. We're hoping, we're really hoping that this will increase capacity within the team and allow for a greater strategic oversight and to review, to be able to review any new policy that has been implemented. So we also want the task and finish workshop with the head teachers at the cross-phase meeting to include a discussion about the review of the education welfare process. Before I go on to the next action, is there any questions so far? Because I appreciate that I've gone through that quite fast.
Yeah, there's a lot of information there, Helen. I was writing away, trying to keep up, really. Yes, we've got Councillor Mike White, please. Mike?
Yes, thank you, Chair. In regards to school policy, included with the policy, the governing body should have a terms of reference related to the policies. So I think it's important that that point is emphasised as well when we drawn together the new policy, that is included within the terms of reference of that new of the policy, because parents have the right to ask for a copy of any school policy, which we are allowed to let them have. But just that, if we can emphasise that point when we are meeting, we are meeting with the heads group and the information being sent out to schools. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mike. Helen?
Yeah, apologies for the omission. During the first and second action, there is a little bit further on which does involve governors and the work with the governors, but 100% agree with what you're saying. Thank you. Should I go?
Can I, sorry,
Yeah.
Helen, can I just ask, with Parents and Carers Forum, it's great that we got positive, engaged parents, but are we thinking about those parents who are less engaged with the education of their children and perhaps not as engaged as some parents with the life of the school? You know, trying to get closer to those parents who might need a bit more information, advice and encouragement to actually get involved to ensure that the children are turning up when they should be.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. One of our strategies here and one of our action points is to look at our communication and the ways in which we are communicating to make sure that we are bringing on board all of our parents and not just the ones that will engage. Absolutely agree.
Lovely. Thanks, Helen.
Did you want me to continue? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay. So our next action would be to consider the increase of emotional-based school avoidance and to ensure that this informs developments to support the emotional health and psychological well-being group. I put an acronym there again, sorry, it's EPU. So that is, emotional health and psychological well-being. Okay, some of the outcomes that we hope to achieve from that would be to support schools to engage with parents and carers on attendance strategies. So one of our progress to date is we have whole team EBSA training organised for the Education Welfare Service. So we're quite pleased that that has been put in place in May 2023, and that is going to be carried out by one of our educational psychologists, Kath Bailey. Okay. So also we've got a review of the whole school approach to emotional health and wellbeing funding and closer engagement with the strategic group to ensure a targeted response to increased attendance and engagement, and with that specific focus on EBSA, the emotional based school avoidance. Unfortunately, budget pressures have meant that the funding that we've received via the whole school approach have been now offset for existing salaries and been incorporated into existing wages, rather than us being able to appoint a dedicated officer. Okay, so our next action point would be to analyse attendance data and use that data proactively to target need and to set realistic targets. So some of the outcomes that we want from this action is regular data analysis to inform our practice. So the Education Welfare Service have been asked to work differently to to provide intense targeted support to those schools with attendance below 90%. And we want further analysis of the effectiveness of the fixed penalty notices. We've had 147 go out to date. I think somewhere I've written in here that there was 112 just before during the autumn term. We're not 100% sure of the effectiveness of this. We're not sure whether parents are just paying them and just continuing to not send, but it's something that we really want to monitor. So our progress to date, we have seen some improvements in attendance during the autumn term. So we know, for example, that the average attendance for all our secondary schools is 2% higher than the previous year. Our primary schools were doing really consistently quite well, actually, in the first part of the autumn term. In the first 3 periods of the autumn term, they'd increased attendance quite significantly. During that very last few weeks of the autumn term and that Christmas period, there was a lot of illness around affecting our primary schools, and obviously the information that came out from the NHS about keeping children home if parents thought they had scarlet fever, strep A or anything like that. Unfortunately, we saw a massive decline in attendance in primary schools in those last couple of weeks before the half term, before Christmas, which has affected overall performance for our primary schools. And our other progress to date, we further embed and share the good practice through agreed processes. And again, then obviously I talked a bit earlier about fixed penalty notices. They have been reinstated, but we're still slightly concerned about whether that is actually working and the effectiveness of that.
Can I
Did you
jump
want me
in?
to stop
Can
there?
I just,
Yeah.
only for a second, fixed penalty notices, how much and at what level, at what point are they triggered? So parent gets a fixed penalty notice, what's the lead up, what is the attendance level and how much do parents have to pay?
So the first fixed penalty notice is £60. There is no sort of cut off really. It's down to the school and the EWS. The normal consistent point is obviously below 80%, but that is in consultation with the school. We wouldn't obviously automatically trigger a fixed penalty notice at that point. What would happen would be there'd be work around the family, a team around the family, looking at it holistically, what's going on for the family, are there any social issues with the family, and so on. So those fixed penalty notices are used effectively to target those families where there is persistent non-attendance. Sorry, was there any other questions at this point?
Yeah, Chair, could I can't see. I've gone on to my tablet now and it's not much better off. Could I ask, you mentioned 2%.
Yes, go on, Lyndon.
2%, higher at comprehensive and you did a percentage then for primary. Have you got actual figures for the various schools?
We do have figures for the schools and we do have that data monitoring. I can pull them off and let you know at the end if you prefer, or we can circulate if appropriate. But I haven't got them actually on my screen at the moment. So I haven't seen the figures for this term as yet, but we have got the figures for the autumn term.
Great. If we could circulate them, that would be marvellous. If the chair is happy with that. Oh, I can get my picture on the this. Yeah, if the chair's happy with that.
Yeah, that's no problem.
As long as the director is content with the sharing of that data, I'd be happy. Helen?
Yeah, attendance figures have been shared among schools across schools in Swansea, so I can't see that's an issue. It doesn't identify individual pupils at all. Thank you.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Lyndon.
Thank you.
Can I make a point. This relates to what I think of now, thinking about the report for last time, but my mind was going back to the Policy Development Committee series of meetings last year as well, and the very strong focus we had on data relating to vulnerability. And the phrase that keeps cropping up to me is stats and stories. So looking at the statistics, but seeing the picture behind the stats, looking at the stories. And it seems to me that in this plan, that reflects the approach. It's not just looking at the data, but it's trying to peel back the data and look at the issues that need to be unpicked. Would you say that's a fair summary?
It's certainly what we tried to do, definitely. And yeah, I'm really happy with that summary. Thank you. You've articulated that much better than I could. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Helen. The other thing that occurred to me when I was going through this was, and we discussed on this previously, about there's something going on in society. I know we've had the pandemic. I know we've had those issues. I know we've mentioned a few times that there are particular challenges coming out of the pandemic, but they are multifaceted. One of the things that occurred to me was the increase in autistic spectrum disorders in recent years as well. And I wonder whether that is going to be part of this approach to really try to understand the sort of health implications as well as the wider implications of the issues that we're facing.
We've certainly put some regular meetings in for my team and the ALN team, just so we can discuss cross sort of cases, really, to make sure that we're getting that holistic approach to all our families and to all our children, and to be able to speak to our schools as a whole service rather than individual teams. So we're trying to go for the holistic approach.
Thank you, Helen. Do we have any more questions in the room? Online? Okay, Helen, carry on, please.
Thank you. So our next action is to ensure prevention and early intervention strategies linked to other priority areas to ensure our children actually want to attend school. And I think that's really important. So some of the outcomes that we'd like to achieve would be to support our families to reintegrate our children who have been electively home educated to return to school. And we'd also like to consider, like I said, attendance holistically, and to ensure effective approaches are in place across the Directorate and the wider Council. So one of the examples there would be ALN inclusion team. So our progress to date is that we have an officer who has been appointed to support electively home educated families. The post is funded by Welsh Government, and the grant specifically targeted at those who are electively home educated. There was a significant increase in the families choosing to home educate post-pandemic. This trend has settled. I've got some stats on the board there. I think it's 5.2 per 1,000 pupils now REHE, compared with 7.2 in the previous year. I suppose that comes with a little caveat. We have some budget constraints at the moment, so it might not be possible to continue with this actual post, but the work might need to be incorporated into existing work of the Education Welfare Service in future. So we have an education inclusion officer who has been seconded to scope targeted external provision, which promotes engagement and contributes to the well-being of each learner. So we're hoping through this post we'll be able to build up our external provision and look for really good bespoke packages of support to really target and make sure that our learners have the best experience educationally. Like I said earlier, we've got monthly meetings set up with the Additional Learning Needs and Inclusion team to discuss our crossover cases to put together that holistic approach. And we want to engage further with the early help hubs, EHH, sorry, so many acronyms here for me, to discuss the outcomes of joint meetings. I think this is the last one, so you fed up on my voice now, I'm sure. So one of the last actions is to communicate expectations to partners and stakeholders, particularly our governing bodies, and develop authority-wide communications on attendance via our social media channels, which I think is something you alluded to earlier. How are we going to engage with our families that potentially haven't been engaging so far? And we think that via social media networks and channels, that might be the best way of doing it. So one of our outcomes would be consistency of attendance and expectations of all our stakeholders, and improved outcomes for our learners. So our progress to date, we've had initial discussions around social media communication, and we are looking to finalise any communication strategy within our attendance policy. And that's it. Thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you very much, Helen. Can I go once again, please, to Councillor Mike White online?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just in the last slide, but obviously the involvement of stakeholders, governing bodies and that. Are you intending putting key performer indicators in place so that we can monitor?
We've started looking at performance indicators already. That was obviously something not in there, but that would be as part of our wider process and our process reviews. But performance indicators are going to be a big part of the way we move forward.
Yeah, the reason why I asked that, Chair, because we can then keep an eye on where schools are supportive and where they're not.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. It's the it's the obvious way, isn't it, to really keep an eye on what's happening at the moment. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mike, and thank you, Helen. I absolutely agree with that. I think we asked in a previous meeting about key performance indicators, and suggested that they are incredibly important. What gets measured gets done, and making sure that if we have a new strategic lead in place, he or she knows exactly what we are expecting as a local authority to see that improvement. It's crucial, isn't it? Really. And then I suppose with the stats and stories thinking, to have the backstory for when things are going well, what works, let's do more of that. But critically, if things are not quite going as well as we were hoping they would, to understand the reasons and then to look at what new approach we can take. Because one approach is not always going to work well, so we need to be prepared to skin the cat in whatever way is most appropriate. Other questions? Mike, your hand is up. Do you want to add anything? In the room, colleagues in the room? No, there we are. Robert Smith, Councillor Robert Smith.
Yeah, if I can just, echo what Helen has said and thank her for the work that's going into this. But I think the agenda says part of the story is attendance and inclusion, and the two things go hand in hand. And by that, I think we need to take a broad definition that takes into account behaviour. It takes into account how we support all our learners, and include the ELN, the links that Helen described earlier with the ELN. So it's making sure that all our policies are aligned, because they all impact on the same performance indicator. Now, instead of chasing key performance indicators, appreciate we need them to manage, and you value what you can measure and so on. But the key thing is that all our policies are aligned and that we draw on the learning from one to inform the other. And I think working across the directorate with our schools, with parents, with the learners is the only way we're going to achieve concrete results here, and that's what we're after.
Thank you, Rob. It's really helpful. I think for me, it's interesting to think how we work across directorates as well. So that our links with, obviously internally to education, but also critically in the attendance context, colleagues in child and family social services, and the challenges they face are the same challenges we face. We see different impacts and different outcomes and different services, but often, as we saw last year in the PDC vulnerability data, you can overlay the data, sometimes geographically in the worst of circumstances, the most deprived, I always hesitate to use that word, but also we need to take a very low level, street level focus. I think it was Councillor Jan Curtis pointed this out in her community, where you've got one street where there are no issues and everything seems rosy, and the other end of the street you've got huge issues, and that comes through the data and the patterns of behaviour that we see. So there's that partnership and collaborative approach is what's going to make this work, isn't it, I suppose? Okay, nobody else is indicating at this point in time, which means at this stage we can thank Helen for her excellent input and insights today. That really helpful, Helen, and building, as I say, on the work that you and Kate did last time for us. And I can feel this is coming together in a meaty, very meaty and very interesting area for us, which is going to bring its own results, I'm sure. So on that point, we can draw a line under agenda item number 4 and move on to the work plan. The work plan that we've got in front of us tells us that our next meeting is on the 15th of February, where we are going to focus on strengthened and effective school governance. And then we'll have the same topic then looked at again, as we've done throughout this year, on the 22nd of March. So for me, I'd like to remind colleagues of the importance of the work that was led by Councillor Fiona Gordon a number of years ago on her scrutiny inquiry report into governance that was distributed by Gareth for us previously. Gareth, could you reshare that? Could you just resend the email? I think that's a very good starting point for us to look at the challenges of school governance. And then we build on that meeting then on the 22nd of March. Are we content? Robert, please carry on.
Yes, and I think the comments that Councillor Mike White made earlier reinforce the importance here. It's an onerous job. It's a thankless task being a school governor, and it's something that we expect volunteers to undertake from their own volition. Now, we need to support our governing body, and we need to ensure that our governing bodies are working at optimum effectiveness. We also need to ensure that they're not overburdened and can't cope with the amount of responsibility that they have. And I think what Mike alluded to earlier, the way we can support them in this instance in terms of attendance and inclusion, but across the whole range of duties which they are required to undertake. And I think that that's going to be crucial moving forward as well.
Thank you very much, Robert. So do we have any other comments? Anyone want to add anything there? I would echo those comments, absolutely. I think I've been on governing bodies one way or another now for 20 years. And sometimes we see that governing bodies do have to really step up and really take a lot of responsibility. And that sometimes falls on the shoulders of a few people who take the lead. So our role is, I suppose, in looking at effective school governance is in how we can add value and provide additional support based on the key points that were made as a starting point by Councillor Gordon's excellent scrutiny report from a few years ago. Councillor Mike White?
Yeah, on that subject area, Chair, perhaps would it be a possibility then, perhaps so that we can make sure that we can get all schools and all communities involved in this area of working as an effective, I know governors should be working with and having an effective school governing body. Plus, if they could, I don't know if we're allowed to do it, plus the director will tell us, if perhaps you could have an actual training session within the actual comprehensive school with cluster schools and areas, so we can sort of it this sort of add on then of what our intentions want to be. Just a thought it was.
Thank you, Mike. Do you mean after we look at in February and March, and then to open up the learning points from that to governing bodies? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, once we got a bit of meat on the bone, now we can perhaps take back to governing bodies, and then perhaps we can then have perhaps a meeting within that cluster area to show what our ambitions are in turn, and how we can bring them on board.
Before I bring Helen in, can I ask Councillor Bev Hopkins, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I just say that the amount of training that governors are offered now is second to none. I think since we've been doing it on Teams, I may be wrong, but I think there are more governors attending training sessions now than they were before. So I do think that is a fantastic opportunity, and I think it's something we really should carry on, because not everybody wanted to go down to County Hall and things like that. But as I say, the training sessions that are on offer are a wide range, and there's something for everybody, and there's a lot of opportunities to go to these training sessions, not just one. So I do think that as an LEA, you offer a very good range of facilities there for and support for governors, which is important when you come across areas where you haven't got the expertise that you could do with. But I must admit, I've always found that the support that is there for us as a governor, if you have a situation that you can't face alone. There's always somebody there to help you through that situation. And I can just do nothing but thank them for that.
Well, that's great to hear. I'd agree with that as well, Bev. Thank you very much. Can I ask Helen to respond to Councillor White's point first, and then add anything you want with Bev's?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to acknowledge Councillor Hopkins's remarks. Very pleasing to hear that feedback, Councillor Hopkins. And we endeavour to do our best and to support our governors in the best way we can with the resources we've got. That said, obviously we want to improve the offer. We're coming out of a pandemic, and the opportunities of working in a digital world is very positive. But the pandemic has thrown up some challenges as well around governance. So we really want to set a refreshed vision for governance across our schools in Swansea. And to come back to Councillor White's point, it's absolutely clear that we communicate that new strategy or policy or refreshed vision, whatever it looks like. I think it's important that we reset our stall, and we do that in partnership with governors to show that solidarity of support, really, to show that we are very keen to continue to work in partnership with the volunteers as described by Councillor Smith. Diolch.
Thank you, Helen. Is that okay, Mike? Content? Go on, Mike. You're on mute, Mike.
Yeah, it was just an option perhaps we could have looked at. So we could have had, you know, a group of primaries all together in our clusters to give them that this sort of new policy that on strengthening.
You put yourself on mute again at the end.
Yeah,
Mike.
yeah. No, as I say, it's just that they might have given the opportunity for our cluster schools to come together within our comp to roll out how we intend to take this school strengthen the school governance in our schools.
That's great. Thank you, Mike. And I think for me, I think that, and I know we don't want to preempt what's going to come in when we look at governance, but I always wonder, we've got an awful lot of them across Swansea, and at a cluster level, I wonder, for me, as a bit of a squeaky hinge, you know, whether we need every governing body to have a full board of governors and expect every board of governors to have the full range of professional skills, knowledge and insight as volunteers that we expect them all to have. The weight is massive, isn't it? And it's such an invaluable and important role. I think this area of work is going to be equally as exciting as the others have been for us. So on that point, I'm not seeing anybody else indicating here. No. So we can now just confirm again that the next meeting is to be held on Wednesday, the 15th of February at 4 o'clock. And at that point, can I thank you all very much for your attendance and bring the meeting to a close. Thank you all very much.